Thank you everyone for joining us today to discuss politics and economics in Milei's Argentina and their regional impact. We have an amazing panel. First, I want to thank the Institute of Latin American Studies for organizing this event, asking me to moderate this panel. Also, for the support of the Institute of Global Politics, the Argentine Student Association, and the Latin American Students Association, and everyone, of course, here for being with us. So we have a great panel to discuss these issues. I'm going to briefly present them and then give them the floor. We have, first of all, Marina del Poggetto. She's the executive director of Ecogoconsultor. She holds a degree in economics from Buenos Aires University and a master's degree in public policy from Torquato Di Tella University. She has worked as a consultant to the IDB, the European Community, and UNICEF, and also served as deputy manager of macroeconomic analysis of Argentina's central bank, and as chief of advisors of the Secretary of Economic Politics of the National Ministry of Economy. Then we have Martín Uribe. He's a Robert A. Mundell Professor of Economics at Columbia University, a research associate of the National Bureau of Economic Research, and editor-in-chief of the Journal of International Economics. He obtained a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago, a master's degree from SEMA, the Center for Macroeconomic Studies in Argentina, and a bachelor's degree from the National University of Córdoba. And he has made scientific contributions in the areas of international economics, monetary economics, and public finance. Then Victoria Murillo, she's a professor of political science and international and public affairs, and the director of the Institute for Latin American Studies here at Columbia University. Her research on distributive politics in Latin America has covered labor politics and labor regulations, public utility reform, education reform, agricultural policies, and economic policy, and her more recent work focuses on electoral behavior, contentious dynamics, and the analysis of institutional weaknesses. Victoria also received her BA from Buenos Aires University and her MA and PhD from Harvard University. And finally, here is Horacio Rodríguez Larreta, who served as chief of government of Buenos Aires City for 2 terms between 2015 and 2023. And he's one of the founders of the Republican Proposal Party, or PRO, which then became part of the Juntos por el Cambio coalition. And as part of this coalition, he also ran in the country's presidential primaries in 2023. Horacio holds a degree in economics from Buenos Aires University and a master's in business administration from Harvard Business School. About the dynamics of the event, well, each speaker will have 10 minutes to present, and then we'll have a second round in which each of you will have 2 to 3 minutes to respond to each other's and make comments, and then we will open the floor for questions. So if this is okay, we will start with the economics side with Marina.
Well, thanks for the invitation. I have a presentation.
Yes, it's. The mic is not on.
Ah, great. Think my mic. Okay.
Okay, well, again, well, thanks for the presentation. I bring a small presentation. I will try to adapt to 10 minutes. But I want to show some things. First, I use this triangle in order to try to order the analysis. I think that to work, you need the 3 axes of the triangle. You need a program. I include there a stabilization program. It's not a stabilization. You need a program in order to recapitalize the central bank balance sheet. I will talk about this. But you also need 2 other axes. One is the reforms. You need reforms. You need reforms at least in 2 directions. One is to increase the productivity of the economy. If you don't increase the productivity of the economy, you can open the economy without a disaster in employment terms. That is what passed in the history, more than one. And you also need a fiscal consistency to be sure that the consolidation of the fiscal figures will be forever. Because you need to cut the money printing, and that is part of the stabilization program. But you need that the fiscal consolidation is sustainable. And on the third axis, you need the governability. In terms of governability, well, Vicky and Horacio will talk later, but I used to talk in three terms. First, the social reaction. For the moment, the social reaction is nothing happened, and Milei stay in the polls. Second is Argentina is a democracy. You need to pass the bills through the Congress, and you need the Supreme Court doesn't null them. And the third, for me, the most important, is to extend the horizon of the economy. If you don't do that, I think nothing will work. You need the three axes. I am an economist, and I will talk about the first one. So if you think on the program, this is the real exchange rate since the mid-90s. The green line is the blue chip swap. The blue line is the official currency. The red is the level the IMF said it is okay when Massa devalued the currency in August after the PASO, the primaries. The dot line, the blue, no? This is the devaluation, sorry, I can use it. When the present government devalued the currency at the beginning of the program, they moved the official exchange rate from 360 till 800. At the present levels, it is near 1,400. No, we appreciate the currency because inflation jumped, and they use a crawling peg at 2% per month. And the dot, the other line. Is the level when Macri devalued the currency in 2015. So we are in the middle. The real exchange rate is still 2 or 3% above the Macri's devaluation, but it is appreciating at a fast pace. If you see this, here I have, because they devalue, they include a crawling peg of 2% per month, and at the same time they include an 80-20%. All exporters need to sell the dollars, 80% to the official currency, 20% to the blue chip swap currency. So the exports level now is near 900, the red line. The light blue line is the importers' dollar, because most importers need to pay the import tax. But this is the schedule. If each month inflation reduces faster, but to 12, 10, 11, and the crawling peg is still at 2% per month, you will appreciate the currency. You can't keep the 80-20, because if you continue sending 20% of the total exports to the blue chip swap, the central bank will start buying less dollars in the next month. And at the same time, you can't keep the import tax forever. So if you think the program, Milei's program at the beginning, it is much more heterodox than what Milei used to say. At the beginning, he devalued with capital controls, and at the same time, he increased the capital controls when the gap hike at the beginning of February. And he put a limit on the transfers of financial assets to abroad. The second thing is he closed the economy. He increased the import tax, and at the same time, he put a schedule for importers to pay installments that increased another import debts for almost 6,000 to 7,000 in the first 4 months of the year. The third thing is he reduced the interest rate twice, and interest rate now is near 6%, well below the inflation rate. And they put a cap on the possibility to increase the crawling peg on the economy. And at least he started talking with different sectors in order to try to control the prices. The last was the medicine, the prepaid medicine. What is the market are looking now? Because we are in the middle of a party, a financial party. that reduced the country risk from 2,600 till 1,200 today. And at the same time, you have an increase in shares. And Argentina, it's a financial party. And the main question is if Argentina is a trade, like always, or it is a case of investment. Well, what is the markets are looking? I think first, inflation reduction. And the main question is, what will the government, the central bank, do with the crawling peg at 2%? The second thing is the central bank purchases. They continue buying dollars daily, a lot of dollars daily, but the main question is what they will do with the 80-20 and the impact of importers that start paying the whole month of imports in May. The third thing is the fiscal result. Result. No, it is showing strong adjustment. I will show some figures, and the last three are politicals. I won't talk about this. Inflation. They hike inflation with the devaluation and the deregulation of most prices at the beginning of the government. Inflation jumped, that is food prices, to 40% in annual terms, and now is well below 10%. It is still extremely high. We are in a high inflation process, but reducing from the shock. The second thing is the utilities rates are increasing, but they are not increased yet in the process. This is our figure for March, maybe could be a bit lower. April, it is reducing 25%, 20%, 13%, 13, 10, but they're reducing at a lower pace. And that is the impact of the utilities rates on a wage, on an average wage. In the convertibility regime in the 90s, it were about 15% of the wage. I can use it. Before Macri arrives, it reduced to 3%. Macri tried to increase utilities rates at the beginning fast, then he got a problem with the Supreme Court, and they increased it to 12% again at mid-2019. That is what Alberto Fernandez did. In 3 years, he did the same, the three administrations of Kirchnerismo, to 4.5%. Mas increased it to 8%, and then when he won to win the election, he cut the increases and reduced to 4% again, and that is what Milei announced he will do. Now we are in 6. The last month is 6. They will increase it to 14 to 15%. So when we see what the polls reflect, they doesn't reflect it yet. They will reflect it in 2 or 3 months. This is when we talk about the problem. I talk about the central bank balance sheet, the lack of dollars and an overhang of pesos, and pesos that create endogenous pesos. Endogenous pesos, no, because they need to print money in order to pay the interest rate for the deposits. Behind this, you have 3 problems. One was inertia. The second thing is the relative price problem. And the third thing is the gap. The gap is reducing because you are selling dollars in the blue chip swap market. And you keep the capital controls at the same time. This is the relative prices in Argentina. This is what the Kirchnerismo did. The prices for goods are extraordinarily expensive, utilities rates are extraordinarily cheap, and the adjustment is made only through the incomes, not through the goods prices. And I will pass this. The second thing is the central bank is buying dollars, continues buying dollars, I told you before, but negative reserves are still negative. Negative reserves, when they arrive it was near $11.6 billion. Now they are negative 3.6. They are still negative. They improved the central bank balance sheet after buying $12 billion. But the central bank's balance sheets are still negative. They haven't got reserves. And in terms of the overhang of pesos, I will show only one. They destroyed the overhang of pesos because they closed the fiscal deficit and they closed the money printing for the fiscal deficit. They print money to buy dollars. They print money because of the interest rate on remunerated liabilities. But when you see what happened with the overhang of pesos, I include here the total pesos of the economy. I add the M3 and the debt held by the market, the treasury debt held by the market. And we can see when they arrive is the money overhang were 20% of GDP, that is July 23, November 23 were 18% of GDP, and now it's still 18% of GDP. What they did is to destroy the monetary base, and they changed the composition of the rest of the pesos. They increased the debt, the treasury debt held by the market, and at the same time, they reduced the remunerated liabilities. And the ratio between free non-remunerated pesos to remunerated pesos increased to 3. So they don't clean the central bank balance sheet. They are cleaning it, they're trying to clean it, but they still keep on the capital controls. And if he continues reducing the interest rate, and at the same time they continues with the crawling peg at 2%, I think the market festival won't be forever. I think that this is more a trade history than a financial history. I have other figures in terms of fiscal numbers, but I will talk with them about them later because I haven't got time. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, thank you very much, Marina. We give the floor to Martín Uribe.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Martín, sorry, I think the mic is up there.
Okay, so I have only 10 minutes, so let me paint with a very thick brush here. I think that the main contribution of the current administration has been a change in the mindset of Argentina. The idea that growth has to be led by the private sector, that inflation has a fiscal origin that is fueled by money creation. I think all of that is good. I don't agree with the populist side of this government, but I think a determination, conviction is necessary. More specifically on the economic front, the government has succeeded in controlling money creation to finance the fiscal deficit, and it has reduced the fiscal deficit, though I have some caveats there which I'm going to touch upon in a second. Having said that, I think there is ample room for improvement. The government, inexplicably, in my opinion, has maintained almost intact a very intricate, obscure web of exchange controls that it inherited from the previous administration that I think is impeding economic growth. It's not the only factor, but it's one of the main factors that has caused economic decadence in Argentina in the past 15 years. And it's very harmful. If you are an exporter in Argentina, you bring your dollars, you're obliged to go through the central bank, that the central bank can give you any exchange rate it wants on a discretionary basis. The same if you're a producer who needs imported materials, you are obliged to ask permission to the government to give you the foreign exchange, and again, the government can give you any exchange rate it wants. In fact, there are multiple exchange rates. It's a very complicated system, extremely distorting. I think it's not really clear why the government maintains these exchange controls, given that it prides itself for being the leader in economic freedom in Argentina and the world, they say. So I can offer two explanations. One is the fear that if they leave the exchange controls, the peso is going to depreciate greatly. I think that is unfounded because, again, they have succeeded in stopping money creation to finance the deficit, so there's no danger on that front. The second is that these exchange controls have a very important fiscal component. They represent a very important source of revenue for the government, and they fear that they cannot do without that source of revenue. I think that that is also unfounded because there is a lot of room for cutting government expenditures. I don't have time to go into that. And also it's very likely that very shortly there will be a big tax exemption that was introduced by the previous administration. It's going to be undone, so the government is going to regain, and this has to do with the income tax, so it's a big chunk of money. So it is inexplicable why the government hasn't lifted completely these exchange controls. I suggest that they be lifted, and if it was up to me, I would lift them today. I think the government should move to a floating exchange rate regime, and the central bank should focus as a monetary instrument on the interest rate. That should be the monetary instrument, in my opinion, which is what all the central banks in the region do. The government has asked as a condition to lift the exchange restrictions for $15 billion from the IMF. I would suggest the IMF, and especially the Treasury, the US Treasury, which is the deep pocket agency here that really matters, not to open the wallet to Argentina before the exchange restrictions have been lifted. Use it maybe as a reward for having lifted them, but not as a incentive to do it, because Argentine policymakers have done it 1,000 times. They ask you for money, you give them the money, and then they don't do what you want them to do. So I don't have time to talk about more structural reforms. Let me tell you just two things. One is that the government in these 100 years, 100 days that has been in power.
It felt like 100 years, obviously.
I hope this is not a self-fulfilling prophecy. So in these 100 days has been in power, has sent to Congress literally about 1,000 deregulation measures in the form of one mega decree and one mega bill. Most of those deregulation measures are good. Some of them are not good. I don't have time to talk about that in detail. But what is surprising is that inflation being perhaps the most pressing problem to solve in Argentina, those 1,000 deregulation measures don't include a piece of legislation to grant the central bank independence. Today, the central bank continues to be, and perhaps even more than before, an agency of the Treasury Department. In fact, the Minister of Finance and the central bank president are partners in a consulting firm. And I can give you examples of how that lack of independence is being manifested right now, but I don't have time to talk about that. The other thing, so I think that it is pressing, it is very important that the central bank sends to Congress as soon as possible a piece of legislation that grants the central bank independence. There are a bunch of already proposals for such a bill circulating in Argentina. Any of those is more or less okay. Finally, I'm not going to talk much about the fiscal deficit because I don't have time, except to tell you briefly that it's true that the government has made progress in closing the fiscal gap, but this closing has been based on unsustainable measures. Basically, essentially, two things. It has reduced the real value of pensions. You know that in Argentina, the pension system is nationalized to a large extent. And the second thing it has done, it has been to completely stop public works, directly public works done by the central administration, but also indirectly through cutting transfers to provinces to do public works. So that is very unsustainable because soon we're going to start hearing that people kill themselves more than they usually do on roads, that bridges and ports and hospitals start falling apart. So that is a very, very short leg approach. There are, as I said before, ample room to cut the fiscal deficit in a sustainable way. The Argentine government is oversized and very unproductive, so there is a lot of room to do it there and quickly, easily and quickly. So I have exactly 47 seconds. So let me summarize, even though this was a summary. So let me give you the summary of the summary. I think the exchange restriction should be eliminated quickly. The government should move to a floating exchange rate regime. It should continue with zero money creation to finance the government. I suggest that the policy instrument be the nominal interest rate. The government is leaning towards a fixed exchange rate regime that I think would be a losing proposition. We have done it many times and we have failed with fixed exchange rate regimes. So it should be, I think, floating, and the interest rate should be the instrument. And the central bank should be given independence, and the government should try to look for more sustainable ways to reduce the fiscal deficit. So I'm going to stop exactly on time.
Perfect. Thank you. So I just want to make a comment before I start about the freedoms of the government. So the freedom is relatively, in the sense that, for instance, labor unions have negotiated collective bargaining contracts, and the government is not accepting the level. So using the powers of the state that they didn't like so much, they have not approved those collective bargaining contracts. So it seems like with exchange rates, and I mean, there is a lot of heterodoxy in the use of freedom by the government. But it seems, I have to talk about governability, the third part of the triangle. And there has been a lot said already that Milei has no legislators, or very few legislators, 7 senators, no governors. His team is quite inexperienced politically. He has not even been able to fill every position in the state. And we can talk about that, but I think it's also important to talk about the rest of the political system, and I want to emphasize that. There is a huge level of fragmentation. And so it's not clear with whom should he negotiate, when they said, like, not that he loves to negotiate, but it's not clear if he liked it, with whom should he negotiate. So this election was similar to the 2001 crisis. In 2003, Nestor Kirchner was elected with 23% of the votes. That's even less than Milei got in the first round. True enough, he was part of the Peronist party and a former governor, so he was able to reorganize the political system around Peronism, now renamed Kirchnerism, and that became two organized poles in 2015 when the non-Peronist fragmented opposition became together in what was at the time Cambiemos. and with the election of Macri in 2015, that reorganized the Argentine political system in two poles that were quite ideological to differentiate with the past. So how this ended, we all know the story. The economic record of the last administration was pretty bad. The economic record of the prior administration wasn't good either. So voters chose an economist, even if it's an eccentric economist, but still an economist. And he claimed that he had something new to offer, and that the reason why we were where we are is because everybody before him was terrible, the casta, right? The majority of voters bought this message in the second round. He got 55% of the vote. And not only that, that is not as surprising as the fact that they continue to support him despite a deep recession that I think, according to Marina, will be around 3.5% of GDP, dramatic declines in salaries and pensions, around 30% in 100 days. That's pretty dramatic. So, for instance, one of the surveys of Polyarchia, which is the one I normally use, and they survey every month, in the last one on March, 58% of the people had favorable views of Milei. That's not as surprising as the fact that 54% of respondents said they didn't have enough money for their own expenses. And 69% said they were worried about either them or someone in their family losing their jobs. So there is a combination there that I think is important to understand. Inflation has been coming down and has also been coming down as a concern of the people in surveys. Still a main concern, but it's coming down. And the idea that next year will be worse, it's also coming down. So there is some level of optimism. And the question is, what is the impact of public opinion? And I know Horacio will disagree with me, so it would be good, but really politicians in Argentina, with some exception, looks at surveys before doing anything. So they are very important, even though they might be not that long views. So the voters of Bullrich and Milei in the first round, we polled them in December, and they look very similar in ideological terms. I don't know if this would be true before. And that means that it's very hard for the non-Peronist parties to survive. The second thing that's important to notice from the election is Milei won in all but 2 provinces. So the interior of the country really said no to a polity that's pretty much around the city of Buenos Aires and its surrounding belt called the conurbano in terms of subsidized public services, media attention, and policy benefits. That puts pressure on the governors of those provinces, the fact that he did so well there. And finally, the other novelty that I think is important is the fact that young voters, and especially young male voters, are really the core of Milei's coalition. This might be due probably to the pandemic, and we can discuss why, but this is also a global trend. Around the world, in the younger generations, the women are becoming more liberal and the male are becoming more conservative. So Argentina is not that different. Now, these voters are crucial in something that is very important for Milei, which is the cultural battle. If you talk to anybody in the government, they keep talking about the cultural battle and the idea of reshaping political narratives, and even the idea of what is commonsensical in Argentina, which would be very important if he were to build a political coalition. In fact, I would say cultural issues have proved very useful around the world to build political loyalties. And there is some indication that we are back to the 1990s, and we know that didn't last for so long. And the majority in the UDESA survey agrees with the idea with fiscal adjustment policies and with fiscal equilibrium, which I'm sure if you ask a decade ago would have not been the same consensus. Now, Milei is very odd. He surprises everybody because he doesn't do what the rest do, right? He has no political career. He didn't expect to win. Nobody expected him to win. In fact, like a year and a half ago, we probably would have expected Horacio to win, and he will talk about that. But that means that Milei has nothing to lose. He has no reputational cost for failing. He is very bold for that very reason. It paid to him. He's also an excellent communicator, maybe entertaining, maybe outrageous, depending on your point of view, but he can be viral. He's very eccentric, to put it some way. His personality is odd, but that makes him look authentic. Politicians lie, the guy doesn't lie. That was, he promised to fiscal adjustment and bad times, and that's what he delivered. So that's his persona. We have heard from Marina, he's more political than he looks. His economic policies turn out to be heterodox in many ways, as both economists have pointed out. He nominated a person to the Supreme Court that it's of dubious. I mean, there have been a lot of allegations against him, but what's more important, it seems that he has the necessary votes in the Senate to approve him. So even though he has no party, a small legislative delegations, no governors, and he has need to rely on executive powers and this public opinion, he is continuing with some governability. So your question, why there is no protest, why there is only resistance, because there's nothing on the other side. But that also makes negotiations hard. What did he did? Executive powers. He had this omnibus decree that you hear for the first time ever. The Senate rejected an omnibus decree. He had to withdraw the ley de bases. These make signs that he doesn't have governability that concern Marina, concern the IMF, but I think governability requires not just something on his side, but also something on the other side. The fragmentation of the political system has served him in the sense that there is no real opposition, no coordinated opposition, but it's also not clear with whom should he negotiate. The non-peronist coalition, Cambiemos de Juntos por el Cambio, is broken. Most of the pro-voters defected to Milei, so he's going to absorb the party, seems to be. Many radical voters, especially in the interior, also support Milei, and it's not surprising that Lustó is the main person opposing him, because he's from the city of Buenos Aires, where Milei is not that popular, and he has no executive responsibilities. The Peronists have become a confederation of groups without a clear leadership. After the worst electoral performance since the transition to democracy, they never lost in so many provinces. Its electoral strength, which used to be across the country and in the provinces, is now completely dependent on the province of Buenos Aires. That's the stronghold, and that gives a lot of power to Kirchnerismo, because that's the stronghold of Kirchnerismo. In the interior, most of the candidates associated to Kirchnerismo did very bad, lost governorships. One would think that their natural leader should be Axel Kicillof, the governor of the province of Buenos Aires, but that would require him to win a national election, two very difficult things: differentiate himself from Kirchnerismo and survive 4 years in the province of Buenos Aires, which is highly dependent on federal funds. And it's been hard for the people who were governors of that province to become president. So in this context, everybody turn to the governors. The governors, there are 9 Peronist governors, 10 of Juntos por el Cambio, and 4 of provincial parties. So it seems we're back to the 1990s on politics, not just on economics. There's some crucial difference with the 1990s. In the 1990s, the majority of the governors that allowed governability were Peronists, like President Menem. In the 1990s, the governors controlled the legislators, because the legislators were elected on party list, and the governors were crucial in deciding where you go on party list. Now the governors do not control all the legislatures, sometimes only one legislator. The legislators are elected by different parties, so even if you're of the same coalition of the legislator, you might not be loyal to the governor. And finally, and this comes with the economics, in the 1990s, the governability that Menem achieved in alliance with the governors was very expensive in fiscal terms. And in fact, that's how convertibility collapsed. So I think that's a difficult formula to replicate. I think so far what Milei has been done is what people don't expect him to do. So when he's had legislative defects, defeats, he was proud of them. He said, this is the casta, they are creating hurdles, we should keep fighting, and in 2025 we will have a larger delegation. I think he will pass some of these laws now because of where public opinion is. But the conditions that are allowing Menem and will allow him to pass laws in the short run, may shift rapidly. And I think here, one thing that's important is he might need to adapt if those conditions change. But when you do something and it works, it's very hard to adapt. And he had the strategy that he has was incredibly successful in the short term. So I think it will be very difficult for him, no matter even if he's more political than we think, to adapt. And there is at this point no alternative to Milei. So that's the survival of Milei, is voters not just support him, they want him to be successful, because what will happen otherwise? And I think that's still to be seen. And I use my 10 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I ran my campaign with the flagship of consensus, saying that Argentina, what it needed was to build a broad agreement on a comprehensive plan that lasts for long. I used the words consensus, dialogue, agreement, coalition government. I claimed for a team with experience on public service, using the example of Buenos Aires City. I made a moderate approach, and I'm here today, and Milei is in the pink house in Argentina. So it didn't work. There are many explanations for that. I try not to be on the extremes, not to suicide myself, because a year before for many Argentinians, I was already president. But but also not to go to other side and say that, well, people made a mistake when they vote, which is a typical reaction of a politician, no? And trying to learn from it, which is not easy. My view is that Argentina needs three things: an idea, a vision, a plan, a long-term plan. But as important as it is a political support to turn this idea on governmental decisions. A state decides through laws, decrees, but that's not enough. A decree, a law is a paper. To change real things, you need that this law is executed. So you need execution. The three things are equally important for a real change, because the only change that matters is the one that happens. It's not the one that is proclaimed. It's the one that happens, and that is maintained in time. So again, a vision or an idea, political support or an agreement, and execution. On that, this government, my view, is it has an idea, which on my view is narrow, is short term, but is very valuable, seeing the history of Argentina, which is his determination to go for a macro stability. But that is a precondition. Again, it's very valuable. His determination, probably the most determined since Cavallo, Menem, on that time. Since then, there was nobody so determined to achieve fiscal equilibrium, macro stability. That's very good, and we have to support that. But again, that's short term. My view is that as important as that is that you need a development plan, and you need to build a state that gives equality in opportunities. In a country with almost 50% of poverty, that's as important as the stabilization plan. But again, ideas. Again, we can say that Milei, at least for the short term, the near term, he has a clear idea of what he wants. But again, as important as is the political agreements, and as of today, 3 months and a half or 4 months of government, he didn't get any agreement to pass any of the laws he's trying. Not only that, it's not. You were asking, well, who he would have to agree with anyone. at least with one. It's a very strange case that a guy that won the presidency in Argentina with the power that the president has, he didn't add up even one, probably one, I think, deputy, expert, even one, of 250 or 270. He didn't enlarge his support in Congress. He doesn't have a real agreement with anyone. He doesn't believe on that. He says that consensus is status quo. He every day or every week he's insulting me, saying, well, he wants a consensus, not to change anything. Now he's talking about that he needs a, how we call it, a pact. But again, he doesn't believe on that. And also the third, the third things you need is the capability of government for execution. You need people with experience. You need people that knows how to move that elephant that is the state. And on that, he appointed, most of the people he appointed doesn't have any experience at all. He doesn't believe on that. There are many examples up as of today that things that the government tried to implement, and when they get to execution, they couldn't. For example, the subsidies on transport, historically, the government subsidized the companies, and which is a good move, he tried to subsidize demand for people who really needed it. Well, they tried to implement it. It was a big mess. Nobody could get a ticket, and they have to go back with that. You need execution. Again, it's as important, the ideas, as the capability of building an agreement to transform those ideas in laws, and the capability of transforming the laws in real facts through execution. That's why I am skeptical on the situation, because it's not that he's saying, okay, I agree on that, that I need execution, I will build on that, give me some time, it's the second step. No. He denies the role of state at all. They didn't buy the vaccine for the dengue. We have the worst dengue epidemic ever in history, people dying. I didn't buy the. That's the government. That's the state. They're moving. And even in this will they have for stabilization plan, I agree on the doubts that Marina and Martín told. Even that I doubt on the result, but it's not my main field of experience. So I'm skeptical because of my triangle, which is again the idea plus the political agreement plus the execution, two sides that doesn't exist, and he really denies on that. He doesn't believe on that. The role of opposition on that. First of all, at 4 months of a new government, it's difficult not to expect that the opposition is fragmented. It happened the same when Macri was elected, even more. When Macri was elected, Macri brought a group of 20-something deputies, congressmen to his side. So breaking the Peronist opposition was also breaking by Massa with the, how do you call, the federal party, you know. So it was already broken. That's what happens in a country like ours at 4 months. It's not new that. And again, the fragmentation could be an opportunity. Could be an opportunity to have different parts broken that he can negotiate one by one. But again, instead of negotiating, he goes to Congress and says they are part of a corrupt caste of people that they want to maintain their privileges. It's very difficult to ask those people that you address to them as a corrupt caste, then to ask them to vote the laws you need. And even if I agree with Victoria that he may get some part of the law, some part of this omnibus law that was a big omnibus at the beginning, was a small car probably today. Yes, small taxi. Today a bicycle. But again, he will get something. But that's very short term. You need a much stronger agreement to support the deep and politically costly reform that Argentina needs, and to maintain that on time. I mean, I think it's called a Pyrrhical victory to get a law today when you have all the congressmen hating you because you address them as corrupt and caste. So, and in terms of the opposition, remember that next election in Argentina is not a national election. The election is district by district. So having the good candidates, again, starting from my skeptical view of the government, I don't expect that they will make such a great election next year. Because even if, with all the doubts that our economists said, they begin to stabilize a little bit the economy, I mean, the economy is not only the monetary stability. Argentina needs a very deep and very detailed improvement in efficiency of the economy. And that's a lot of millions of detailed decisions, sector by sector, theme by theme. So that needs people that knows. That's what Cavallo did in the 90s with a huge team of people that were studying every one of those details for years. And they get to government, and the most valuable thing Cavallo did was the structural reforms. He really improved the productivity of Argentina economy, but not with one measure, doing a lot of micro things. That's something that this government does not believe on that. Again, it's not their building that they say that when they stabilize, they don't believe on that. That's why I have all those doubts. And for next election, it's not necessary that we have that we meaning the moderate center, which I know today sounds very boring to say the moderate center, but I still think that this is what Argentina needs, and I don't change my view because of having lost the election. And you were saying today that the strategy is successful. The strategy has been successful to win the election, but probably what you need to win the election is not necessarily the same as what you need to change the country, and that's why I doubt about next year's election with Milei, because if he doesn't get results at the end of the day, I don't see him having such a good election. And it is true that today is nothing on the other side, but we don't have an election now. Today, Milei is not fighting against another group; he's fighting against reality that he has to change. So it doesn't matter today. The popularity, suppose let's say that the polls are right. There's not an election today. He needs a poll with 2,070 people seated in deputies, 72 senators. That's the poll that matters today. And on that, he's not getting any result. And at the end of the day, people will vote results. That's why I doubt. So, and I think our objective or our responsibility is to build a center moderate and keep our beliefs, keep fighting for our belief that Argentina, what it needs is that. It's a long-term plan, comprehensive, and run by people with experience for that. That's what I believe. Okay.
Thank you. So you wanna? Shall we go?
So yes,
around?
do you want to begin, Marina,
Yes,
with
okay.
2 to 3 minutes to
Okay.
reply? Thank you.
There are different levels of the discussions. It's difficult to order. First of all, I not agree that the government can remove the capital controls without the crisis or without a strong restructuration of the contracts. I think that when Milei decided not to broke the contracts and a mix of status quo capital controls and liquidation of the pesos, he decided to go to a road. He chose a road. He chose not to go to a dollarization or not to go to... The central bank balance sheet is improving, but improving a bit. You have less negative reserves, but you still have negative reserves. You can't float without reserves in a country like Argentina, with a country risk near 1,200 after the reduction. Argentina haven't got access to the credit, and now with the capital controls, the interest rate in the treasury peso debt is strongly negative, and in dollars debt it is still too high. So if you remove the capital controls, you have two problems. One is what happened with the demand for pesos. I agree that they cut the money printing to finance the treasury. But you are still printing money to buy dollars, you are still printing money to pay the interest rate on remunerated liabilities of the central bank. And so what I think is they choose a road. My main problem is what Milei is thinking, because we are all time asking the same question: who is Milei? Is really that Milei is pragmatic and he always turn, or it's not true? What is he looking behind the reduction on interest rates in the present context? He wants to destroy all the remunerated liabilities of the central bank because he thinks that if he destroyed it, they will reduce inflation and he could remove the capital controls. He doesn't care about the exchange rate level. He's not care about competitiveness. You have a strong recession. Behind the strong recession, you will have a hike in unemployment. So I'm not a political scientist. I try to understand on the other way. But what I'm thinking is that he chose a more heterodox program. Every day we are asking if he really chose this, or we think that he chose this, but he thinks that if he destroyed the pesos in the economy, he could dollarize the economy. But he still have, I showed you before, $45 billion in treasury debt in pesos and $34 billion in remunerated liabilities, and no reserves at the central bank. So I think that we must be a normal economy, but we can't decide that we must be a normal economy assuming that we have. This is the problem with Macri's administration. It was one of the problems. He never made the fiscal adjustment. But well, that's my 3 minutes.
Thank you.
So that's something that happens to me every time I talk to economists in Argentina. They tell you, you cannot do it. You cannot lift the exchange restrictions. It's like, it's an abnormality that in Argentina has become so normal that no one sees any way out of it. For example, before the current administration, you ask, why can't you lift the exchange controls? And they told you, well, because the Argentine government is financing 6 percentage points of GDP with money creation. Until you stop that, you cannot do it. Now money creation to finance the fiscal deficit is at 0. And you say, okay, now you can do it? No. You cannot do it now because of the remunerated liabilities of the central bank, etc., etc., etc. I think that all of that is, sorry to disagree with Marina, but I think that all of that is unfounded. I think that once you have had control of money creation to finance the fiscal deficit, you have the necessary conditions to lift this set of distortions, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important ones, not the only one. Argentina is full of regulations and distortions, but this is perhaps the most important impediment to economic growth. Sturzenegger in the Macri administration lifted them basically in the first month of the Macri administration. Nothing happened. People thought that we would all die. No one died. People got up, went to work, did what we all do. So I think I understand the concerns of economists and politicians that live in Argentina, but when one has a look from the outside, again, I repeat, and I'm going to close with this, is a degree of abnormality, normality that is really incomprehensible. Finally, I want to say only one word. I fully agree with Horacio in the sense that it pays off to start investing on a coalition, we can call it center moderate or center coalition that is equidistant from the two populist poles that are now dominating economic and politics in Argentina. And even though it looks like a very low return at this point, I think is a viable long-run investment. So in that respect, I fully agree with Horacio.
Okay, so a couple of comments. One on Marina and the social explosion. So remember the 1990s. Labor unions and social movements. So in the 1990s, we only had labor unions and the formal sector. As a consequence of the 1990s, we have now the social movements and the informal sector organized. So there's two issues there. For their leaders, the public opinion hates them. They are pretty low on the valuable, and they look at surveys before doing anything. So that reduces their capacity to call for yet another general strike or to even organize protests. The second problem they will face, and it's starting to happen, is unemployment will go up because of the recession. When unemployment goes up, labor unions don't strike. That's a rule that any labor economist will tell. And the third thing that is happening is, yes, Horacio is right, the administration doesn't work. It's a terrible disaster. That's particularly costly for people in the informal sector when food is not reaching the delivery that has to reach. So, thinking that people in this situation is going to organized protests, it's a much harder situation. And the most clear cause, if you're looking, that people could organize around these pensions, right? 30% down, everybody has a relative that receive a pension, Peronis, Juntos por el Cambio, poor, rich, everyone. Yet the pensions have not, the pensioners don't mobilize themselves because I guess they're older. And nobody is taking over the pensions for reasons that I don't understand. There used to be a party of pensioners in the past, so there used to be a political force, but that's not the case anymore. And Horacio, again, I'm thinking of the 90s and everything is different. But Menem, a lot of what he did, he negotiated with a single person, right? With Alfonsín. The Ley de Emergencia Económica was negotiated with Alfonsín. The Pacto de Olivos was negotiated with Alfonsín. I know that Milei does not like to negotiate, but even if he were to, there's no one there. So instead of creating a coalition, what he can do is vote by vote, that would be cheaper also, to pass certain laws. It doesn't seem irrational what he's doing. So even though so I think in that sense, the fact that there is nothing on the other side, even if he had a different personality, it would make it hard for governability.
Well, the first conclusion is, as someone said here, it's the politics stupid. I don't have any doubt of it. When today some people ask me, well, what you would have done different? And I say, all the stabilization plan, it's on the right direction. The thing is, you cannot, on my view, pass such an aggressive adjustment, reduction in expenditures without a political agreement. And again, the fact that it's fragmented, it's an opportunity. At the end of the day, it's cheaper. You have to negotiate with 4 or 5 here, this group of 3 or 4 here. Of course, it's more. It takes more. Job. You have to work a lot on that and understand what are the needs of each of them. But at the end of it, there's no one strong on the other side. You need to negotiate. To negotiate with the view of building a coalition government. But what's the problem with that? That what has been successful for the campaign, for winning the election, which was to blame on the political cast, to say that we I included, we are all corrupted. And again, he continues with the same strategy he used to win the election, and probably it's different what he needs now. My view is that he doesn't build a stronger agreement. Now he calls it May, 25th of May Pact. No? He blames on the dialogue, on consensus, but now he has the pact. At the end of the day, it's a question of wording. No? But if he cannot build that, it will be very difficult to pass all the laws, to build a state that delivers results with execution. So, again, I thought he had an opportunity of having scattered all the opposition. And the public opinion. The public opinion today doesn't vote. It's not so important for the politician, because if it were so important, he would have passed the laws already. The other day he had the DNU, the DNU decree, the decree rejected in the Senate, even with the popularity he has, because those guys that are in the Senate, that are in Congress, they know they don't have an election today, and that public opinion is very volatile, and even more now. I saw the other day a chart that showed how long it takes for a new government to get into a negative image. And the time shortened 3-4 months as an average. So that's very volatile, even more if the support is the youngest vote, which are more volatile even. And I think, Martin, your support of building a moderate center coalition, I don't know if it will pay off. In the last election, it didn't at all. So, well, my view is that there's a good chance that the pendulum, it's not necessarily ideological. Because if it were ideological, it meant that people voted for Milei for being on the right side, so the pendulum would go to someone like Isilov on the left side. My view is there are more chances that the pendulum is more methodological, that it goes from an extreme to the center. But that's going to be also on our ability to build that center that you were saying, and to offer a good alternative. Knowing that it's very difficult to build the message of let's say the epic of moderation. It just sounds like a contradiction in itself, but that's our challenge, because I still think, and I won't change my conviction, that what Argentina needs is a moderate approach. To build a coalition, to have a long-term plan, to sustain it in time, to negotiate, and to bring people with experience to government. Today in Argentina, anyone that has political and public experience is, for Milei, it's a corrupt, but for the group that he brought to his team. No? That's, for those, they are not the casta. But for anyone else, we are all the casta, we are all like rejected by him. So again, that's why I'm skeptical, and that's why we will be working on what Martin said of a center moderate alternative for Argentina for the next years. That's what I think that our country needs.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to open the floor to questions. I have a couple of them in mind. First, I was thinking for the economists in the panel. This is something that Martín Uribe mentioned. He said that, well, the government still has a lot of room to reduce money expenditure. I was wondering if you could, but also if Marina, you have an opinion on that, and you could give us more detail as to where do you see that room for adjustment. Then another question related to the economy has to do with the energy sector. Like, this is more of a medium to long-term question, but how do you see the impact specifically of Vaca Muerta on the on the economy and on the government's ability to gain, governability and support. And then, well, for the political side of the panel. First, well, we have Milei has announced this Pacto de Mayo for the next month, and both of you mentioned the what his relation is with the governor. So I was wondering, how do you see that playing off for Milei? And the other thing is that, well, this has been a recent discussion, very agitated discussion in Argentina, that has to do with Milei's proposal of 2 judges for the Supreme Court. So also, how are you reading this move, and what are your takes or your views on that proposal?
Do you want to take a bunch of questions and then come
Do you want to
back?
start with that, or should
Well,
we
just
take more?
because of the time, I'm thinking.
Okay, so Marina, do you want to?
If you want to take a few more, then we go back.
I wanted to push back on the moderate, not because of the moderate, but just because what is the marketability or the impact of moderate? I mean, most of the people in Argentina probably have heard moderate from various different angles, and it's really nothing. So this is a question for Horacio, why not really be more? I mean, you don't have to change your view, but just present yourself as not a moderate, but a convicted person with a definitive idea and with a plan and very clear, because moderate is more of the same and continued deterioration. Sorry.
Okay, so we come back to okay, one here.
Yeah, I wanted to hear more about some of the regional consequences, especially in the closing economy. Yeah, I can repeat again. I wanted to hear more the collaterals on the region of closing the economy and some other implications of that. Thank you.
Hello to everybody. I would like to talk about the real economy. We talk about macroeconomics. This 4 months, the government collapsed economy, the real economy, just to stop inflation and use the loss of the power expenditure of the salaries just to stop inflation. So. And they are talking about the V reaction, right? The collapsed economy, and then we hope we're going up again. Which drivers are you looking at, if this is possible? And what do you think about wage and pensions in that recovery of the economy? Thanks.
Still room for another one?
Okay, one more and then we'll get back to the panel.
All right, thank you. I don't want to address the question, but I would like to hear a bit about the relationship between Argentina and Brazil, considering that the political polls of both countries, and have in mind this negotiation process that we are having in table regarding Mercosur and the European Union for some kind of potential economic agreement. This is the question.
Well, who wants to start? Marina? Okay, thank you.
Well, in terms of expenditures, the adjustment is done. It reduced from 42% during the last year of Cristina to 36% last year, and this year maybe it will go to 30%. In the first 2 months, the adjustment is much bigger. If you see what's happened with the figures, expenditures fell 40% in real terms in the first month, January, 36% in the second month, in the third month 30%, so it is reducing because you are indexing the pensions, you you can't cut 90% the public works, you can't cut 80% the transfer to provinces, but at the same time, because of the recession, incomes start falling. In the first month, it increased in the nation 1%. In the second month, fell 6%. In the third month, fell 9%. So the adjustment isn't done yet. You need something else. And the bill they sent to the Congress doesn't include a fiscal reform. They include an amnesty, a moratoria, a change in personal goods. So I think it is chainsaw, no? I think that if you decided to go to I think that you need the definitions of the economy. The first one is who will waste? If the provinces or the nation. Now the provinces are wasting in health and education, and the nation in pensions. That is the agreement during the 90s. In the last 20 years, you duplicate the number of pensionists in the country with the same amount. You send the expenditure in pensions from 5% during the 90s to 9.6% in 2017, when Macri tried to change the indexation formula. Now it reduced to 5% again, with the double of pensionists. That is the adjustment. I think it's impossible to continue with this. So I think you need something different in order to, that's the axis of the triangle. In terms of the sectors, Vaca Muerta, mining, I think that there is a possibility in the country. The investment in the last years in those sectors were extremely high because of the capital controls and the pesos in the economy. No, you have a very negative interest rate, cheap dollars, and a competitive sector. No, you have 3 new oil companies in the country with local businessmen. No, and in the bill they sent, the Bases law bill, they include the RIGI, the regime to big investments. That is extremely good for those sectors, and I think that in macro terms it could be a disaster, because you reduce taxes, VAT, income, accelerate amortizations, and at the same time you allow the companies to live, no, to 30% of the exports the first year, 40% the second year, 100% the third year. So I don't know, maybe you will have those investments. I don't know what this investment will leave to the economy. So I think there is a discussion, because you need mining, you need oil and sector. These are sectors that you must use in order to recapitalize the central bank, to abandon the capital controls. You need to order the macroeconomy. Just a number. If everything is okay, you will double exports in the next, from now till 2030. It's a lot, but without access to credit, it will allow only to pay 7% of increase in imports per year. And that will allow to grow on only 2% per year. So if you see what happened in the Kirchnerismo, when from 2003 till 2011, you triple exports. And you're in the same, no? You're worse. So it will depend I really don't like the RIGI. I'm not sure about the stabilization program. And in terms of activity, that is your question, the recession is strong. I don't see a V shape because to recapitalize the central bank or to continue buying dollars, you need a recession. The question is what happened with, in political terms, but it's.
So I want to go back to in answering the question about what would be the measures that would be conducive to reducing government expenditure. I want to go back to something that was said earlier, which is the need to have people in the management of the public affairs that know the business of managing public affairs. Because you run the risk of doing the easy and sustainable things. For example, if you reducing government expenditure, the size of a oversized, unproductive government requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of very detailed knowledge about how to do it. If you put that in the hands of people who don't know how to do it, they go for the easy solution, which is what we have seen in the past 100 days in Argentina, which is reduce the real value of pensions, cut in an indiscriminate way transfers to provinces, stop the public work, and that can be extremely damaging for the economy. Reducing government expenditures in a sustainable one requires a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, a lot of investigation on the productivity of government expenditures. Right now, we are doing the easy thing, the easy and unsustainable route. And I fear that the problem is lack of knowledge. That is my main fear, and that is really a really scary kind of feeling. With respect to projects such as Vaca Muerta and these kind of things, I think the government should do nothing about Vaca Muerta, should not give them any specific subsidies. It's a private enterprise, exactly like if I open a pizzeria around the corner. There is nothing special about oil. So I would not give them special treatment. What I think it requires is macro deregulation, right? An economy that is open to international trade, and an economy that has a good and sound monetary policy, an economy that has a good public infrastructure, etc. Once you provide those conditions, you shouldn't give Vaca Muerta more privileges than someone who drives a taxi, for example. There's nothing special about selling oil, or a kid in a garage selling a piece of software, or a farmer in Buenos Aires province or in Córdoba growing soybean for the rest of the world. There's nothing special about oil. So when I hear that we should do something about Vaca Muerta, I say the best you can do for Vaca Muerta or for whatever entrepreneurial initiative in Argentina is, give sound macroeconomic fundamentals. And again, to do that, it requires a lot of work, a lot of knowledge, a lot of dedication. This idea that you can come and cut everything in 2 seconds, I don't think is really sustainable.
Okay, so I'm going to try to answer Malena's questions first. and here is everybody's guess. So the Pacto de Mayo, this is, he said he was calling for a pact with the governors on May 25th. I think the most important thing about that pact is May 25th. I think he was trying to get time and to see if inflation would go down, to see if he could normalize the economy and improve his standing in public opinion, if the governors that didn't have money because of the cutting in expenditures would be more likely to agree to what he wants. And for me, the pact is just a way of getting time. The judges for the Supreme Court. So here somebody told him, judicialization is your problem, right? The decree already has faced problems with the judiciary. The labor reform was stopped because it required a law. So we know that was also the case in the 1990s. That's what Menem packed the court. And given that the court, and this is shameful about Argentina, the court has has not been filled for many, many years now. So it has 3 members, actually 4, but one will retire at the end of the year, and nobody has appointed, replacement because the Senate cannot agree. So that's important to understand the situation. So he nominated someone we should have someone for the last woman who went her tenure on the court, and then someone for the person who will, no need for the second one. The judges, I think he was persuaded that this particular judge, the one that will go first, would get the votes in the Senate. And that's the reason why he appointed him. Why he would get the votes in the Senate? The guy has the habit of opening cases against politicians and not closing them. So that's a very useful thing when you need to get votes. But do you think there was a lot of thought behind the decision? I don't think so. I don't think this is reflecting some pact of any kind. I think it's like, everybody has said, there is not a lot of experience. Somebody came with the idea and he said, sure. He pays a lot of attention to the economy, not to the rest. The regional consequences. So this is, again, I guess for the age, the 1990s, Menem invented the relaciones carnales with the United States. So we would be basically having sex with the United States. And Milei really takes on that, on the geopolitics. He has sided very much with the US in a context in which Latin America is not necessarily doing it, and Brazil in particular. So it's not just the position of being pro-US, the position on Israel. He's overacted. He went to Israel in his first months in office. He invited Zelensky to his inauguration to show his support for Ukraine. And I think this is useful in the sense that, obviously he went to say, Trump, I wish you would win the election, but that didn't cost him so much because the US needs votes at this point, and votes in the region. And the region is not looking as friendly, and the main actor in the region is Brazil, and Lula is playing very independent from the US. So he is playing a useful role for the United States. He rejected to join the BRICS. I think he does it, one, for the very same reason that Menem did it, the funds. He wants the US to tell the IMF and to get funds. And the difference with Menem is I think he's ideologically very much in line with this populist right wing. The reason that's why he came to the US, to the meeting, he was with Trump. And he's really learning from that playbook. Some of the things that he does are not necessarily popular in Argentina, but are part of the playbook that of that political right. So I think that is new. There is an ideological component in what he does that we didn't have in the 1990s. I think I'm gonna stop there.
Well, of course, I didn't know how to market the moderate approach. And I'm not sure if I know now. Of course, I'm not saying vote me because I'm moderate. But again, there is a pendulum. So after the extreme, if it doesn't work, there's a good chance that people value, I wouldn't say the word moderate because it sounds very boring, but let's say a serious proposal based on what he was saying, on a team of people with public experience. In Argentina, it's very valued, our experience in Buenos Aires city. But again, at this election, people prefer extreme positions. And I tried to be clear on what to do. I said, well, to lower the inflation, so I would do 1, 2, 3, very specific in any of the different reforms that Argentina needed. But again, my approach is not aggressive, and I won't change. I won't change who I am, and I won't change what I think. Then, with that, the marketing always plays a role. But you won't change your essence just to run against the vote, because it won't work. So it's not that I have to change my approach. Probably I have to market it better. The thing is, if Argentina demands a different thing of what it demanded in the last election, because if to the extreme, it goes to another extreme. Even if you are great marketing of the let's say, let's set aside the word moderation because it sounds really boring, but I mean a rational, a plan experience. You have in politics, you have examples to justify anything, black or white. But here in the States, after the more extreme position of Trump, it came a very moderate president as Biden. So that's an example where it worked. Then you can say that, well, he was part of the Democratic Party. Many explanations. But after Trump, it came not the other side of the ideological pendulum, the other side of the methodological one, the extreme to the center. I think that can happen in Argentina. That's one of the questions. The second one, I like to take the one of the relationship with Brazil. I think the problem of this president is the same as what Alberto Fernandez did, is to put first his personal position, her ideological position, more than what Argentina needs. Alberto Fernandez didn't meet even once with the president of our main commercial partner, Brazil. He didn't meet once because it was bad image for his constituency in Argentina. So putting first his political position of his ideas. And Milei has done pretty much the same. I cannot imagine that it's good for Argentina to come to the States and to take position in the States election, in any side. To come here and say this is the candidate, I cannot imagine that that's good for Argentina. He's putting first his political position, the same of what he's done this week. As he did this, he now has to overact the support to the States, going to the Ushuaia to meet with this general that came to Argentina. I mean, of course, doing that, he has China against. China is our second, after Brazil, our second commercial partner. 70% of Argentina beef we export to China. I don't know what China will think and do with this overreaction from side to side. So again, it's the risk of having president the same as Alberto Fernandez, that put before his political position, his political ideas, than the need of the country. And only an idea for what you asked. That's what you said. What can you do in terms of to help the fiscal equilibrium? Probably you know more than me. How much is today all the tax break, the sector tax breaks that they're still alive in Argentina? It's above 1% of GDP. There are many of them. In that, government didn't touch anything. No? For example.
3%.
3%, well, that's a lot.
3.4%.
If you cut half of that, you have all the fiscal problems solved.
You have, in Argentina, you have, I said the main lobbies, you have half of everything is is tax. But you collect only 28% of GDP.
Yes.
There are 3.5% of exceptions, and the rest is the black economy.
Yes.
You need to do something with this.
And following of what Martin said, they put, I don't know the person, the woman, they put in charge of the Argentinian IRS someone with zero experience on public administration.
Yes.
For what it could be probably the most important position in Argentina to solve the fiscal deficit is someone with zero experience in public office. I mean, that you have the answer there.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure hearing you, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.